This happened to me a few years ago when I was living alone for the first time. I had just moved into a small ground-floor apartment in a quiet neighborhood, or at least that's what I thought. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine. There was a narrow backyard behind the building, separated by a high wooden fence. My bedroom window faced it, and when I moved in, I realized the wooden back door could only be locked from the inside. I told myself I'd get it fixed soon, but like most things, I didn't. The first few days were peaceful, unpacking, getting used to the noises of an old building. Every night I'd hear the heating click or pipes groan, or some neighbor closing a cabinet. I remember thinking, it's fine, every building has sounds. But the sound that would come later wasn't the building. The neighbors next door were strange. I'd seen a man and a woman, maybe in their 40s, standing in their yard smoking. They never waved, sometimes staring at my window longer than people normally do. Once I nodded, trying to be polite. They just turned and went inside. One night, a week or two after moving in, I was brushing my teeth when I heard a knock at my front door. It was around 10:30 p.m. When I opened it, 2 police officers were standing there. They asked if I'd seen or heard anything unusual coming from the unit next door. Apparently, a neighbor had called about shouting and a crash. I said no, and they thanked me before heading toward the other apartment. I remember closing the door and standing there for a moment, toothbrush still in my hand, thinking, what the hell's going on next door? The next day, the man from that apartment was outside. When he noticed me, he gave this forced smile, the kind where the mouth moves but the eyes don't. He said, sorry if it was loud last night. Just had an argument. I muttered something like, no worries, and went inside. But something about him bothered me. His tone didn't match his face. It sounded rehearsed. After that, I started hearing odd things, whispering, faint, like 2 voices behind the wall, even when I knew they weren't home. Once, I woke up at 3 a.m. to what sounded like scraping, slow, deliberate scraping, just outside my bedroom window. I froze, listening. Then I heard a soft thud, like someone testing the weight of the window frame. I lay there in silence, my heart slamming against my ribs, trying to convince myself it was a raccoon or something. Eventually, it stopped, and I must have fallen asleep. A few nights later, it happened again. Only this time, it wasn't outside. It was coming from the wooden back door, a single click, like a handle being tested. Then quiet, then another click. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a lamp, and crept toward the door. My hands were shaking so hard that the lamp cord brushed the floor with a soft scrape. I whispered to myself, it's locked, right? It's locked. When I reached it, I could see that tiny sliver of light where the door didn't seal completely, and through that gap, I saw movement. A faint shadow sliding past, like someone walking inches from the other side. I didn't even breathe. After a few seconds, the shadow stopped. Then a whisper, so quiet I couldn't tell if it was real. Are you awake? Every nerve in my body screamed to move, to run, to do something. But I just stood there, frozen. After maybe 20 seconds, the sound faded. The shadow disappeared. I backed away, turned off the lights, and spent the rest of the night sitting on my bed, lamp clutched in my hands, waiting for morning. The next day, I called my landlord and told him the lock was broken. He promised to send someone soon. That night, I pushed a chair under the handle just in case. A few nights later, I was woken by a bang, not loud, just enough to make my eyes open instantly. Then came the whispering again, closer this time. And then, the unmistakable sound of wood creaking open. I looked toward the back door and saw it, that narrow wooden door slowly inching inward. Someone was outside. I could hear feet moving softly on the porch. Then, suddenly, footsteps by my window. Slow, deliberate. One step, pause, another step, and then, a low chuckle. I couldn't move. I remember my body literally refusing to respond. Finally, I grabbed my phone, but my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I dialed 911, whispering to the dispatcher that someone was trying to get in. I don't even remember the next few minutes clearly. I remember the red and blue lights flashing through the blinds, the sound of police boots on the gravel. When they opened the door, the air outside was still, cold, and no one was there. The officers checked the backyard. They found fresh footprints in the dirt right below my window. The fence gate was wide open. One of them asked, "You sure you didn't see anyone?" I just shook my head. I didn't trust my voice not to crack. They told me they'd patrol the area that night and that I should stay with someone if I could. I packed a bag and went to a friend's place. When I came back the next morning, the chair I'd wedged under the door was pushed a few inches aside. To this day, I don't know who was there or what they wanted. But sometimes when I lie awake at night, I still hear it in my head. That whisper, "Are you awake?" I used to think nothing truly bad could happen in a quiet neighborhood. You see people mowing their lawns, walking their dogs, smiling politely in the hallways, and you start to feel safe. That's how it was for me, until I realized the man living across from me was watching me every night. It started after I moved into a small apartment complex on the edge of town, one of those places that feels a little too empty after dark. My unit was on the second floor, with a small balcony overlooking the parking lot. Every night I'd sit out there, drink coffee, listen to the faint hum of traffic, and try to unwind. It felt peaceful, normal. Then one night I noticed him, the man across the lot. At first, I didn't think anything of it, just some neighbor standing by his window, smoking. But then I realized he wasn't looking out the window. He was looking straight at me. The first few times I brushed it off. Maybe he was zoning out. Maybe I was imagining it. But the more I looked, the more obvious it became. He stood there night after night, lights off, curtains half drawn, his face barely visible except for the orange flare of his cigarette. I told myself, don't be paranoid, but I couldn't shake it, because every time I moved, his head turned slightly, like he was following me. One night I tested it. I waved. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there. That's when the unease really set in. It wasn't the kind of fear that hits you all at once. It was the slow kind, the kind that builds up when you start realizing someone might be studying you. A week later, I was sitting on my couch when I heard something. A faint tap, then another, coming from the window behind me. That window faced the narrow alley between our buildings. I muted the TV and listened. The tapping stopped. Then, after a few seconds, another one. I pulled the curtain aside just a little and froze. He was there, standing in the alley, looking straight up at my window. His face was pale, motionless. The light from the parking lot caught in his eyes just enough for me to see how wide they were. I jumped back, grabbed my phone, and called the police. When they arrived, he was gone. They searched the area but didn't find him. One of the officers asked if I was sure I knew who it was. I said yes. For the next few nights, I didn't see him. The blinds across his apartment stayed closed, and I started to feel stupid, like maybe I'd overreacted. Then, around 2 a.m., a few nights later, I woke up to a low buzzing sound. It wasn't loud, just constant, like an electric hum. I got out of bed and followed it into the living room. It was coming from my window. A tiny red light was blinking between the blinds. When I leaned closer, I realized what it was. A small camera. It had been taped to the frame, pointed directly into my apartment. I ripped it down, hands shaking, and immediately called the cops again. When they checked outside, they found a small ladder right under that window and a pile of cigarette butts, still fresh. They went to the man's unit across the lot, lights off, curtains open just enough to see the beam of their flashlights. A few minutes later, one of the officers came out. He told me no one was home, but inside, they found something else. Multiple computer monitors, a whole setup. And on those screens, live camera feeds. Not just mine, but from other apartments in the building. He was gone, no trace, no forwarding address. I moved out within a week, but even now I still close my blinds before sunset. And sometimes late at night when the light hits my window just right, I swear I see his reflection there again.